Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin, eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. You've caught me on the second part of my previews for 2021. These are all albums that part of my big influx of music that I get at the beginning of the year. And these all tend to kind of set the stage and draw the curtains on what things are going to be looking like for me musically in 2021 going forward. So it's always very exciting. I got a lot of music to get through. This will be 6 reviews, and each one of these reviews is very, very superficial. Just a couple of listens for each one, giving me an idea about what I'll be listening for, with the intent perhaps of later on this year doing a more dedicated review on albums that kind of stand out. So let's get started. The first one is Fantastic Negritos. Have You Lost Your Mind Yet? This is a really appealing update to the intent of the blues. It is arguably kind of a blues album from the perspective of blues songwriting. It's not a blues album from the perspective of him, Fantastic Negrito, being an amazing blues guitar player. That's usually in my mind whenever I think of a blues album. That's what comes to mind. But instead, Fantastic Negrito uses the blues tradition as the basis for writing pretty clever, pretty well thought out songs. Certainly songs that are catchy and are grab the attention of the listener and draw them in. And in some ways, almost to a fault. In some spots in this album, you can kind of get the feeling that when the Fantastic Negrito has found a lick that he really likes, that he will kind of really make sure that the listener gets it. But even if this seems redundant from time to time, the Fantastic Negrito's charisma and his message are all very compelling and worth the time of investing in. And there's lots of successful songs on Have You Lost Your Mind Yet overall. They're very infectious and they're very easy to listen to. They're a lot of fun and the energy is very high. But the core of what makes this album successful is the way that he passionately and directly addresses components of sort of the black condition. So it's a very pertinent album, a very relevant album and for 2020 in our day and age. But it's also one that's still very entertaining and doesn't pander to the listener. It doesn't hold any punches in its messaging. So, Fantastic Negrito's Have You Lost Your Mind Yet? Okay, next up is the Orchestra International du Vetex, Total Tajine. This is a mind-blowing collection of songs from this international brass band, that kind of European group. And they specialize in sort of Eastern European styles, like gypsy style, klezmer music, that sort of style of music, kind of high energy polka feel in a very broad sense. 2 discs worth of this. It's a phenomenal musicianship all throughout. The energy is super high. The showmanship is second to none. There's definitely some flash and bang going on. A big group, but very cohesive and incredible chops, musician to musician all across the group. The songs on this album have a reverence for tradition, kind of like Tarafta Hayduk's might, but also has a little bit of an irreverent attitude at the same time, kind of like what Gogo Bordello has. The biggest fault that I could find with this particular recording is just kind of listener exhaustion. All the tunes, and from my first superficial listenings, are very, very high energy and they're very fun to listen to, but at 2 discs worth, by the time you're done, it just feels like we kind of have been through the ringer to a degree. I think that's something that will fade, though, as I become a little more familiar with the album and feel more comfortable with this nuance. Okay, next up is Koriky's self-titled debut. Now, I was never a fan of Fugazi. Not because I didn't like Fugazi that much, because when Fugazi was sort of in their ascendancy, I just wasn't in the market for that sort of thing. I kind of was ping-ponging back and forth between progressive rock music and Frank Zappa, and then power pop music that kind of stemmed off my interest in early 90s interest in Jellyfish, and beyond that, the Beatles and that sort of thing. I didn't really ever check out Fugazi, but now I really want to. I feel like that's a really gaping hole in my catalog, because as this band has 2/3 of the members from Fugazi in it, a lead singer and the bass player, there's a real comfort and confidence that they have to their songwriting that definitely comes from the long history of performances and playing live in the long string of albums. There's a natural ease to their music that comes from the chemistry that they have in their everyday, I think, music making, their relationship with one another.
But she's seen a lot of action. Oh, terrible things she's seen on a screen. It's a clean kill, it's a clean kill, it's a clean kill, but it's not clean. It's a clean kill, it's a clean kill, it's a clean kill, but it's not clean.
The songs are very direct, very kind of, in many ways, stripped down. And that's definitely part of their appeal. And despite having a very minimal instrumentation and arranging for the songs, they're very convincing and very catchy and appealing. Again, so this is an album that's made me kind of rethink some holes in my catalog. I'm going to have to go back and investigate. So if you're a Fugazi fan, so tell me where to start on that one, because I know it's a big catalog and there's some fervent fans out there of Fugazi. And if you're not a Fugazi fan, I don't know how this compares to Fugazi's work, because again, I don't know their work, but I really like this album a lot. It's one that despite me kind of having an ear towards a more florid, more complex music this last 6 months or so, this one kind of cut through the ice on that and is reminded me of the beauty of simplistic but effective songwriting. Okay, next up is Kai Winston's No World As Good As Mine. My first impression of this album, it's a very large-scale DJ album. But whenever I listen to it all the way through, it's a lot more going on with this album than that. Yes, of course, the kind of house dubstep style sound is there, but it's right side by side with like these huge post-rock, almost King Crimson-esque, old-school King Crimson-esque licks. That also is a style right up against ambient styles and spoken word things. And so there's this sense that there's a very big world that Kai Winston is referring to in this album. And I think that he successfully kind of creates that world within the album's runtime. The problem with this album that I could see is possibly just the broad strokes that Winston's trying to use in making the album. It's clear that he's trying to explore the limits of his own potential and maybe kind of stretching the narrative of this album to a degree. But despite having such a broad variety of styles just kind of sitting right by each other, it actually feels pretty consistent from beginning to end. And I think that this is one that with some familiarity with the album, those boundaries between the styles will probably dissolve some to a degree. This is my prediction anyway, and I can get a better idea of what this album really has happening with it. It's not a listen that is difficult, but it's definitely one that's a little bit confusing. And next up I got E.B. the Younger's To Each His Own. This is the solo venture by Eric Pulido, who is a member of Midlake and has also functioned as the band's lead singer since the departure of Tim Smith. To Each His Own is defined by these richly arranged, almost folk melodies that are embedded inside kind of a pastoral pop framework. It doesn't have too much like the sort of retro feel that Midlake had for Tales of Van Occupanther. It has a little bit more, I wouldn't say contemporary, but definitely a more post-1980 feel to it.
Taking the days last for long. It ain't like it used to be.
Great songs throughout the album, and this is another one that I've listened to probably about 3 or 4 times now, and it starts to open up more and more. First time, the whole thing felt very even and same-ish to a degree, but there's a lot of variety and a lot of really clever songwriting going on in the album, I think, throughout, and it's another one that has enough details to it that warrants closer inspection. Okay, finally, is Speaker Music's Black Nationalist Sonic Weaponry. This is the project of a producer slash theoretician slash visualist named DeForest Brown. And it is explicitly driven by more of a philosophy than a musical idea. It's a musical idea that is born out of a philosophical and theoretical idea. And Forrest's idea is that techno is the realm originally of black music. You know, you talk about blues to jazz to funk to disco to techno. This is a line of heritage that traces techno back to black music, to black traditions. And he seeks to reclaim that tradition in the name of blackness, and for lack of a better way of putting it. But it's not what you think. If you listen to the album with the mindset of it being like a house techno album or something that has a dance floor function to it, you'll be confounded by this album. It's got these kind of skittering, disruptive rhythms that are going on with it that back spoken word passages that kind of detail black narratives from almost like a field recording sound to it. There's not a whole lot of variation from one track to the next, but there are these kind of melodic fragments that define one track over another, and these narratives that he's using to explain the black tradition within this framework of his reclamation of techno for the black tradition. It's a really fascinating and sometimes challenging listen, and it really needs to be listened to in its entirety. It's a long-form listen. There's not really singles you can pull off this album. But as a musical statement that's based around an idea, it is a really compelling work and one that I think that needs further investigation. Okay, that's all I got for you guys this week. Another 6 albums. I will come at you next week with another post. Until then, if you want to know when that's going to happen, please like and subscribe, and go ahead and share this out with your friends too. I have a Spotify account. I'm putting these tracks up, representative tracks up on that Spotify list for 2021. Until you see you next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.